Welcome, Barbara and Colette, to Unleash the Knowledges podcast, Everyday Extraordinary, where it's my job to push the message that we all have extraordinary capabilities within us that I believe simply need to be channeled and activated. I do this by having amazing conversations with everyday extraordinary people like you guys. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to kick off, Barbara. We'll start with you. I'd love to have you share a bit of your background. Obviously, it is out. You've written books about your experience. It's been a robust career of yours, but I always like to have people share in their own words. So how has it been being the only female engineer in the 70s and the 80s in New York City of all cities, and obviously navigating working with Donald Trump and also just the construction industry as a whole?
Well, I wasn't the only female engineer, but let's say that when I graduated, which was 72, there were fewer than 1%, less than 1% of the engineers were women that graduated. And yeah, I did okay in college. The one thing that was problematic, I think, was that some of the teachers didn't want women in their classes and would make disparaging remarks. And also, a lot of the students would, put out rumors that I was sleeping with this teacher or that teacher, to get a grade, which was, not even great. But I found that, I did find people that were supportive of me, and the staff and the laboratories up there where I went to school were extremely supportive because they were mostly minorities and they knew what it was like to be discriminated against. I got into the business. It was difficult. I have to say it was very difficult. People gave me a hard time for being an engineer, for being a woman that wanted to be an engineer. And I incurred a lot of sexual harassment and certainly discrimination. But in terms of working for Trump, let's say, he was not my worst boss. I mean, people don't believe it when I say that, but it's true. And he gave me some opportunities. Of course, I paid him back in spades. And I did pretty well with that. The hardest time actually was when I first started in the business, and there was this one man in my company, was an electrical contractor, who just harassed me to death. Anyway, I'm going on too much. That's sort of what my background is like.
No, I appreciate all of that. And it gives me at least perspective that just even in general of business, but then maybe like engineering in particular was definitely, I can assume that was not a career or a discipline that females really got into during the 70s. Nevertheless, maybe business as a whole. So it's interesting to hear that. And then also very interesting to know that Trump was not the worst that has come across your life. So I can't, well, it's interesting who else is obviously out there, but Colette, we'll bounce to you real quick. You got started in an extremely large company in a sales role where you were also the only female employee. I'm first curious to ask why you even decided to take that role, just being a female and growing up during, the time period that you grew up, but then also learn how you pushed to succeed in that role and also overcome the difficulties that you also faced.
Thank you, Owen. Yeah, where to start? Well, actually, the reason I was just out of college. It was 1992, and I wasn't quite 22 then, but I was a little bit older, and had some experience. So I was in the food industry, and I think this was my biggest lesson learning out of college. This was my first job. To actually have a sales role, an outside sales role. I had been doing inside customer service and inside sales for many years. And so I was, newly graduated. I was on the team. And, I think for me too, really, I had been in the food industry. So this was a segment of the food industry. It was proteins, meats, poultry, fish, and things like that. So it made sense for me. And, I was looking for that in the area. And the boss that hired me, he was a wonderful mentor. I want to just say that. And that I was able to kind of write my own ticket, what I wanted to do and things like that. But there was a lot of difficulty. There were other women at the company and in the company, but nobody that had a sales role. And, like Barbara, there were a few people that really didn't want me there. And like you say, couldn't really understand why I wanted it, but I had set a foundation in that field already. And I just wanted to keep going forward with it. I wanted to go as far as I could. And in fact, I did. And so I had harassment, not really sexual harassment, really just hostility from some of the men, and one in particular. And I tried to handle it myself. And it was like really it was like a pit, what they call a pit, a sales pit, if you've ever seen some of those movies, where everybody's sitting. So it was very open, it was very out in the open, how some of them felt about me, and how I was responding. And I didn't really want management to step in. Okay. But it got to the point where it was getting out of control. And they did. They stepped in, they corrected the situation. And it turned out so well for me. It turned out so well for me. He and we were never best friends, but I made some very good friends. And, I felt like my colleagues really respected me there for the work I did, and was very successful for me. And I don't have any regrets about it. And I would say, for women, just, if it's something you love, fight for it, stand up to people who are harassing you, as long as it's not physical. Okay. And, but then again, if you don't, if you feel like this is too much for you to take on a daily basis, and it's not worth your mental health. I mean, people say, quitting is really sometimes redirecting, right? And, or changing your plans. But I was blessed that it worked out really, really well for me.
So a question for both you guys. I'm just curious. It just popped up in my head. From the moment of like interviewing for the first role or all of your roles to when things were really just going south, or it was clear that there was hostility or even some serious harassment, was that present even in the interview process, or was there like a fake persona or facade that males would put on just to get you in the door and then overpower?
You want me to answer? I'll be happy to answer first. I was an interview for my first job. I had gotten a summer job doing a contact there, and I went back when I finished with college. I've interviews with the next job. I had an electrical contractor. I went on a recommendation from somebody. And when I got to Trump, I had already been working for the general contractor, who also knew me and took me on a recommendation. And Trump watched me and observed me for 2 years and knew what he wanted, and he just hired me. So it was not, it wasn't generally applicable to me that, but, in terms of other interviews I did, reactions of people, it was there, it was underneath, it was, but how could it not be there when you graduate and there are no girls in your class, 600 boys or something, it's impossible to avoid.
Got it. And Colette, any thoughts there?
You know what, I would say one thing I really appreciated about working at the company, everything was out in the open. Nobody was hiding it. From the first day I started, I knew there was going to be some challenges. My boss, of course, no, not at all. He was wonderful, wonderful mentor to me, old enough to be my dad, and just really great guy. But yeah, I kind of saw it from the beginning, and I felt like, this was something I was going to have to deal with. I kind of knew going into it I probably would have to deal with that, but it meant enough to me that I really wanted to do it.
Got it. Awesome. Well, Barbara, I listened to one of your recent, or maybe it wasn't recent, it was an interview of yours on TV, and you made the comment that Trump made this statement that one great woman equals 10 good men. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But then you further hit down the point, which made more sense, that he actually kept women around him because he knew he could never be beat out by them. And it made him feel more powerful. Me, as a millennial and a male, I want you to share, what's the message behind where men cannot think that way, and what was, maybe if there's anything more you want to shed to that main point, but also just like the mentality to welcome women into the workforce. Obviously, in my generation, women are taking major leadership positions, and obviously our vice president is a female. So there's progress being made. Equal playing field is obviously being pushed. But for me as a male and all the men listening, what would you say to, I guess, discount Trump's statement about that, and also potentially allow us to just see women as an equal playing field and not feel inferior or inferior to them.
Well, the thing with Trump is that he at the time, he's changed a lot since I knew him, or knew him directly. He thought that he was paying me a compliment. He also called me a killer, and he thought that was a compliment. He truly did believe that men are superior to women, and I'm sure does to this day. So, to say if you have a good woman, she's probably better than 10 good men. The reason for that is that to get anywhere, we had to work harder, we had to work smarter, and we had to work cheaper. So, I mean, he did me a great favor. No, he got the best person on the construction team on the job he just built, Grand Hyatt, to work for him for probably less than a man would have. As far as today is concerned, certainly there have been great strides in non-traditional, because traditional roles, we know pink collar has been around for a long time, although years ago, women were not typists, men were typists. Women did not operate typewriting machines, interestingly enough. But when it comes to now, lawyers, doctors, they're in good numbers, not where they should be, not in terms of 50%, but and of course they don't quite get the same advancement opportunities that men still get. But in terms of company like a business like construction, we're nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Women in the trades are 3%. Women in the in management is less than 10%. So to tell men what advice could men get? Be supportive. That would be the very best thing I could tell any man. I can't make society change. Men have the advantage. White men have the super advantage. But I think that, trying to be fair and thinking about what is just is something that will lead you into a view of equality. In other words, this just isn't right. This woman's capable. She should be able to do this.
Got it. That's powerful. Colette, was there an experience with you where there was, maybe actually you already mentioned it, but a male figure who was very open about the fact that he was more superior to everybody, or specifically women, maybe directly to you or to others of your colleagues?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the, and I've encountered harassment more than one time in my life too, but I would think, women have been harassed. They've harassed too at times. But I will say that, this person that was harassing me, I could really see that he didn't really feel like confident enough, or he thought somehow me being there was going to threaten him moving up. And that was a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely think it just the competitive nature of most men. They'll do everything in their power to not let anything come in the way of their goals and where they want to reach. And unfortunately, fortunately, today's world, it's moving in the right direction. But unfortunately, during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I can only imagine how brutal it was. I have a family friend who worked in Wall Street. She was one of the only women in Deutsche Bank, and she would tell me that phones were being thrown at women, and it was an insane environment. I can't even imagine the real estate or the financial markets in New York City in general during that time period. But obviously,
think about construction.
Yeah, exactly. With all the materials too around you guys, I hope it wasn't too bad. But Colette, we'll hop back or stay with you because you have a new book that came out December 2021, Reflections for Women at Midlife, that I want to touch upon just briefly. I'd love to hear your take on, first off, mainly the takeaways of the book and the message that you're really trying to push, but the idea that as a young woman professional, there's challenges, but I think to your point with the book and your story, even in midlife, you're still having challenges as you rise through a different part of life during this midlife, where maybe you have a family and some other obstacles. But what you could share there of the message of the book, and then perhaps the difference of what you learned from young Colette going into the industry to who you are today, and how you're still succeeding and thriving in your career.
Thank you. Yeah. The book is called Both Sides Now, Reflections for Women at Midlife. And yes, I have experienced both sides now. So that's kind of why I named it that. But yeah, I think that we all have struggles in life, and it doesn't matter your age. But I think once you start to hit midlife, and whatever that is for you, whatever you consider it, 40, 50, 60, whatnot, one day you wake up and things are different. Maybe you can't put your finger on it, but you know things in your life are changing, you know. And it's a very mixed bag sometimes. Sometimes, you know, we have great things going on. And then at the same time, we can have sorrowful things. Okay. And I think really just learning that what I want to help women with and everyone to take away from it is just that, you know, you need to hold on to your joy while you can. And sorrows are going to come. And sometimes you will have joy simultaneously. And the point is to try to grab hold of that joy while you can, and you know, realize that you know, a lot of people get depressed in later years because, you know, obviously you've lived half your life or more, but there's beauty in this part of life. There's beauty in you know, for women, the confidence levels and being more grounded and just you know, I think it's inherently, we're built that way, you know, and when we get to midlife, we realize it more than ever because we've been really supporting always others. That's been our role, right? And maybe, and there's nothing wrong with that role. There's nothing wrong with, you know, supporting others or being other oriented, as long as you're taking care of yourself as well, you know, and doing that first, like they say, you know, when you're on an airplane, if you're with a child, put your mask on first. Really, I know it's so cliche now, but you know, it can really to really help others. You have to. You can't pour from an empty cup.
And just quickly on that point, is there a reflection practice that has helped you? Are there like actual like practical tactics that you share in the book or that you share with others to help ease through that process?
Well, you know, I think that I've always been very reflective, you know, and I think I learned that when I went to college because my first few years of college were like, let's reflect, let's reflect. But I constantly do that anyway. That's me. But I think for me, I really like to, I'm kind of not the greatest. I guess, I don't know if you can be good or bad at, but meditate a little bit. Sometimes I will take the time to be still. And for me, that means going inside and connecting with spirit for whatever, you know, or whatever you want to call it, the universe. But really, and I was saying this, you know, COVID, for example, was horrible. And there's no getting around it for so many people. But for me, I think for the first time in my life, I really slowed down to really, you know, when I wake up in the morning and I'm alone, like sometimes in the morning, I have a mixed schedule with people and a balance of that. But when I'm really alone with myself, really take the time to be still and maybe meditate or prayer or put on some very uplifting music for that time. I even noticed I've been doing that for the past few years, and my mom passed away about 5 years ago. And I had left my job that I was with, and you know, my brother was sick and everything. But I would take the time to meditate, and good feelings would come over me. Even when I was in hospice with my mother laying there, she was sleeping comfortable. I could have really nice thoughts of her coming back to me, really nice memories. And over these 2 years, I did a lot of that with writing the book. I would recommend anybody write. I mean, if you're not going to write, you know, a book to be published, you should write too for yourself. And I'm thinking of doing a workshop or a workbook around the book in that respect. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I am my past career was in basketball. I don't know if either of you guys knew that, but very high performance, and the stillness is something you definitely need to be in touch with during some times. So I completely resonate with that. I appreciate that. I that's what I was hoping we were going to share some way to really slow things down. And Colette, you mentioned you have no regrets during your life, which I love as well. Barbara, I want to hop back to you. Through all you've been through, the challenges and the successes you've had, where do you stand with potential regrets, or are you happy everything has unfolded the way it is? Because I would also say, in my own experience, everything I've gone through, good or bad, it's made me who I am today, and it's lessons that I've learned. So I'm curious to get your take on the concept of regret now, after all the great things you've done in your career.
Let me first say that I'm reading Colette's book and relating to it amazingly. She hits the nail on the head everywhere. And it's a wonderful book for women, even younger women who are just are not quite there at middle age, to look at, to see what's coming and to appreciate, what's good about it, because there's so much. Regrets, interestingly, I've had some opportunities. I had a job that I didn't take, or maybe left, that would have made me very rich today. And and it was in the business. It was in development, but I don't really have any regrets. I've learned. I may have one regret. Let me just say this. It's maybe a little controversial. I was very fortunate to have children at the age of 36, and I had twins, which was great. So I have a wonderful, incredible family. I felt that the industry pressured me into not having children, because they wouldn't accept a woman with children. And it was very difficult for me too, because I was a woman of that age. I mean, I can talk about not even being able to get a loan when I was, I don't know, 26, because I could be potential pregnancy. And back then they wouldn't take married women's incomes and consider them for mortgages. So, I mean, in terms of regrets, yes, I wish I had started a family earlier and had more children, because that is, of all things I've accomplished and that have happened to me, that is the greatest thing that not that I tell women you don't have, I'm not pushing women to, the mother thing, not at all. But for me personally, that was the best part of my life. So the only regret I actually might have is that I wish that I had more children.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's interesting to hear that the workforce or the industry had that narrative, had that stigma, I guess, to share that it's work, work, work. And I can relate to that with basketball. There's a lot of travel, there's a lot of busyness, and those that take time off for a dentist appointment are then, talked about in the next day.
With me, when I became pregnant and the word got out, I mean, I knew this. People were talking behind my back. She's finished. We won't see her anymore. You don't have to worry about her anymore. And they really did believe that. It's part of the whole thing, not allowing women to be mothers and successful in whatever they choose to be in business. It's part of the whole societal program,
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, we touched upon some advice for men to be more supportive towards women, but I love to, kind of put a bow on the idea of what is the message to young women today from both of you guys. I'd love to get your take heading into the workforce, or even, we can talk even to midlife as well, obviously with Colette in your book. But what's a message there that you can push forward to women to empower them?
I think for me, I would say, sometimes we run into situations in life that really aren't pleasant. And depending upon how much it means to you as a person, as a woman, right? How much it resonates with what you want to do and your values, I would say really fight for yourself, and always get support, always rally allies when you really want something. And also just if that's what's in your heart, if that's your heart's desire, then stick with it no matter what. I think that, and we talk about, it's so funny, and not to change the subject, but motherhood, still the same thing. When I was going, and I'm getting off the subject, I'm sorry, but when I was going into getting a promotion, the same thing, Barbara. HR was a woman, and she recommended that I not tell them that I was pregnant until after I got the promotion. I hated being sneaky like that, but anyway, I'm sorry to get off the subject, but yes, I would tell them, just go ahead and stick in there if you want to. But if you don't want to stay, that's not a failure. Okay, you should never look at that as a failure. It's strength. It takes strength. It takes more strength sometimes to walk away and be true to yourself than to stay there and take harassment. Okay. So hopefully it gets resolved, right? If it doesn't, I think then you have to ask yourself, you have to make that decision. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, Barbara.
I've done a lot of speaking about women in construction, my field, but because, we sort of almost own sexual harassment along with some minors and, heavy equipment operators. The most important thing that a woman can do is believe in herself and never, ever blame herself for something that happened. Specifically, I'm thinking of discrimination, intimidation, and sexual harassment, which I call the big three. You can't, it's like rape victims. And I experienced this. And unfortunately, I didn't have any women to talk to, nobody to help me. I had my mentor, who I called my mentor and my tormentor, because he harassed me all the time, but he pushed me forward and helped advance me in my career. But you go out there and you're wearing a skirt or something, and anything, where someone makes a remark to you, oh, it's because of the way I dressed. I brought this on. I must have said something, because that's our nature. We've been taught to blame ourselves since we were born, that we're wrong and the man is right. So the most important thing, I would say, two important things is, one, to absolutely not blame yourself. It's the most important thing. And the other thing is really to have someone, find a mentor, have someone to talk to. And if something happens to you, you got to record it. You got to write it down. You got to tell people about it. And as far as sexual harassment is concerned, I think the most important thing for a woman to do is to tell the person who's harassing her that she doesn't want to continue. Because, and in front of someone, if that's possible, because when it gets to down to the line and there's been a report made and there are questions coming up, first thing the person, the man, and it's man, the harasser is going to say is, oh no, she went along with it. I think she liked it. It was banter,
Mhm.
So you've gotta recognize, you gotta know, like Colette says, when to hold them and when to fold them. I'm paraphrasing.
I love that.
You need to recognize what is going on, and not say, oh, he's harassing me because he said I had nice hair. Don't fall into that trap, because men love to say that. Understand what happened, talk to the person, and nicely if you can, and then make a decision as to where you're going to go forward. And you do sometimes have to report. If it's physical, not only do you report, you call the police. But learning these things and learning how to take some of this stuff that's thrown at you instead of reacting to every single thing, because there'll be 100 things you can't react. You can react to 2 of the 100. That was my experience, and it's better now. When I had a person harassing me, and I finally, I never reported anything. I reported this one incident to the bottom line. They said it was too important to take him off the job. Right now, that guy would have been fired without a question. But no, pick your spots, find a mentor, always have someone to go to. And yet the other thing about not having someone to go to, when you make your own decision, this is true of everybody in every industry or personally, you make mistakes when you have no one to bounce your ideas off, So those are my words of wisdom.
No, it's amazing. Thank you for both of those messages. I'm sure people listening are going to get a lot away from that. Just because I'm a practical guy, like I'm always looking for the actionable steps. Are there just like a quick couple communities or sites that today that you guys are aware of that women can go to that are facing something like this? Or is it really just finding people in your inner circle that you can, get advice or guidance from? Either of you guys could just answer, just a quick question.
What, you want to answer?
Sure. Yeah, I think community is very important. And I think that, friends, families, like-minded people, meeting like-minded people and talking about these things. And I think there's a lot of strength in that. And I think that can really help you from a communication. Communication is so good to understand what you want to do about the situation. And like Barbara said, sometimes what do we interpret? What are we being hit with? But again, I would just say, be resilient if that's what you want. be sure of what you want, right? If you don't want it, if you really have to do some soul searching with that. I've been in situations
Absolutely.
like that, you know.
Awesome. Thank you. As we wrap up here, I got like 3 fire questions that I ask everybody, and you guys can spend some time on it, or you can kind of give me a quick question, or a quick sentence. But because a lot of the work I do is with authors, you both being authors, I always like to ask, is there a book or a few books that you always find yourself either rereading or gifting to others?
Barbara, if you want to.
Well, I'll use Colette's book as an example.
I gotta get you to write a review, Barbara.
Yeah, I'm good promoter. I just, I haven't done a lot of reading lately, unfortunately. So most of what I'm doing is legal stuff or research on construction and things like that. I'm sorry, I can't give you a good answer to that. Maybe something will come up between now and the end of the interview.
Yeah, no worries. And of course, we have your 2 books that people can grab to learn more about your work and your experience. Colette, any recommendations or books that get gifted to you or you give to others?
One book always stands out to me, and it's really not a business book per se. I mean, I will say the business book that I think I learned the most from very early on was Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and love the message in that. But I think, personally, I've read a lot of personal development, professional development books. One that I really go to and always think about when I'm having a hard time, whatever that is Care of the Soul by Thomas More. And it came out probably like mid-90s. So it's going back a long way. But that was very early in my career, right? And that really, it was from a spiritual perspective, really kind of helped me to move forward. So yeah, I love that book.
Awesome. And it's those.
I thought of a book. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Barbara.
My nature, I interrupt. It's a book called Men Explain Things to Me. And it came out about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was sort of like the beginning or the introduction to what they call mansplaining. And it's a great book for women because they can spot when this happens and stop it. It's an even better book for men. If, in answer to your prior question, you want something to do, read that book and see how men tend to tell an expert she's wrong about something when they know nothing about her field because they think they know everything. So there's a book. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Oh, powerful. I love that. But the one last point I was making with Colette, the idea that lessons you learn early on in your life stick with you. So yeah, books that are from early on in your career. I mean, if the messages, are strong enough, then they are a part of you with whatever you do. And Dale Carnegie, of course, classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The classic message of like, be interesting. And that's how, or be interested in other people and you will be.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Be interested in others. And I found that, especially being in sales all my life, take a genuine interest in other people. And, because people don't mostly do that. We're human. We all like to talk about ourselves. And
Right.
if you're genuinely interested in someone else, that's very helpful.
Absolutely. Next question leads to another kind of idea of a message that you stick with, but do you guys have a personal mantra that you resonate with or you remind yourself on a daily basis, something that's been passed down from mentors or family members, or just a message that, keeps you going each day?
I would say it was just to believe in yourself. And I think I got that from my mother, who thought I could do anything in the world. I mean, in a way she made it difficult for me, but I never stopped to think, can I do this? Or think of my role as a woman or anything else. If something, and I bet Colette would say the same thing, something came to me that I wanted to do, I just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my mom had a big influence on that too. She was very strong. She was very strong. And being her daughter, she taught me that too. And early on, she taught me to respect myself. Yeah, she did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And last thought-provoking question as we wrap up, based on the title of this podcast, what is your guys' definition of extraordinary?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. You go ahead. Go ahead.
I almost don't, I like the notion that someone's extraordinary, and artists and musicians and doctors and things like that. But I think that I have a little bit of a problem with extraordinary, only in the sense that I don't want women, and again, it's always about women, to feel that they have to do something to make themselves important. I think they have to start out believing that they're just as important, which is why I don't like books. I won't going to say names, but talking about will be more like men, or you know, addressing the C-suite and how you get into the C-suite. I want to get into the happy suite, and you know, do what makes you happy, not necessarily what makes the rest of the world recognize you. But I do think that there are many extraordinary people. There are women, and I think in terms of women that have conquered much worse odds than say I have. Women that have been molested and raped and things like that, and got over it. These are ordinary, extraordinary people that you pass in the street. And then there are people like the women that were the first architects who designed San Simeon, which is a big mansion in California, who I didn't even know about, and I'm in this business. She was the first architect to get architecture permission in California. But and there are so many others. I mean, Emily Roebling finished the Brooklyn Bridge. She built that damn thing. She was the one that gave the instructions to the men. And I just saw a documentary that made it look like she carried notes from her husband over to the job site. Now, she was in there doing that kind of courage and that kind of stamina and self-understanding and respect. That is something to be admired. And when you take a standard like that and then you bring it down to a woman who's just doing a job, not every woman's going to be the president, but that she can fully feel that she's accomplishing something and appreciate herself. That's what I want to say. I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
So well said. Yeah, Barbara. I think to be extraordinary is to be as much as you possibly can in this life, living the life that you would choose for yourself. I think lots of times sometimes, and the book is about this too, and part of the reason why I want to do a workbook is like, do we know who we are, right? Do we even know who we are, to figure out, who am I? What do I want? What would I like for my life? And this can be at any stage. But, and we know, we have to make a living. We have to do things sometimes that we wouldn't aspire to do necessarily. But like we've said before, every piece of that is part of who you're becoming. And I think to be extraordinary is to just be aware of yourself, right? Your own beauty, your own uniqueness. And our generation, we thought that was, oh no, that was a bad thing. But I think that's what I would encourage young women and women, our age and beyond.
Well, I love asking that question for two reasons. One, because I get so many different answers, and some people say, well, I actually debunk the concept of extraordinary, because if one thing's extraordinary, then it downplays everything else, which is also amazing in our life. So I like that. I love both your guys' answers, but it really pushes for the title of my podcast, Everyday Extraordinary. My real definition is that, like Barbara, you kind of said, it's just an everyday person, someone who's a mother who might have got left by the spouse and has to raise X amount of kids, on their own. Like that in itself is extraordinary. So really anyone who sets a mission for their life, succeeds, and then perseveres through all the challenges is my own definition. So thank you guys so much for joining the show. I appreciate your time. And if there's any way you want to share right here where I could send people to learn more about upcoming projects of yours or keep up to date with what you guys are doing, happy to, you can share that now, and then we'll wrap up. But I do appreciate you guys coming on.
No, thank you. I loved it. It was great. So couldn't have asked for more.
Thank you very much. It's great to be able to share with someone else your opinion, a like-minded person. I am working on a book right now. It's not, it's in the very beginning, and it's going to be about women in construction, because it's something that I think it is just, people, if they understand this, they will understand so much more. I mean, there are more firefighters, and there are women doing trades, so women firefighters. So it's a great spot to start and really analyze what's going on. So
Barbara,
hopefully
I'm
that'll
sorry.
come out.
You will be a great STEM teacher in the schools now. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I think that's definitely going to be a big calling for you. So